Good afternoon, migrant leaders, mentors. I am so happy to see you all. I'm always really pleasantly surprised by how engaged our migrant leaders, mentors are, and how much you all contribute every day to our objectives as a charity. My name is Elham Fardad, as you know. I'm the founder and CEO of the charity Migrant Leaders. This afternoon, we have an hour together. This is part of our quarterly mentors webinars to continue to offer opportunities for engagement to our migrant leaders mentors and to talk about topics that are of interest to you and related to our charity's work. I'll be giving you a quick update on what's happening lately with migrant leaders and also a quick update on the 2022 Parker Review and what has been happening to corporate diversity and ethnic diversity in large companies. We will then pass over to Farley Thomas, who is one of our valued migrant leaders mentors, who will be talking about some of the work that he's doing to actually address some of the issues that the Parker Review talks about in developing a talent pipeline of ethnically diverse leaders who will hopefully one day lead those big organizations. So without further ado, I am going to share our latest Migrant Leaders Impact Report to help me explain what we've done lately. You should now be able to see our latest Migrant Leaders Impact Report on the screen. This is as at March 22, and you all know about what Migrant Leaders does. We support first and second generation young migrants between 16 and 25 years old, as well as the disadvantaged young people across Britain. We do this by offering bespoke support towards each young person's technical and sector aspirations by providing them a mentor from one of the 95 companies and organizations we work with. The mentors come from all walks of life, different technical fields and sectors, who we match to the aspirations of each individual young person who we get to know. We also have corporate partnerships with Anglo American, Smith & Nephew, Kantar, ABB, Westcon, Comstore, Illumina, Salesforce, and others coming on board as well. And we collaborate and co-develop internships, work experiences, conferences, workshops to really train these young people, give them exposures, and above all, give them the connections and contacts that they need, the relationships that they need early on in order to get the apprenticeships, graduate jobs, and opportunities that they so deserve and simply do not have given their disadvantaged backgrounds. So that's a little bit about where we are today at Migrant Leaders, but I want to take you back to 2017 when I launched Migrant Leaders and what particularly prompted me. You may recall the Parker Review back in 2017. The Parker Review back then showed that actually when you look at the FTSE 100 boards, only 2% of FTSE 100 boards are ethnic minority, what they call citizens of color. And that actually includes non-execs. So if you took the non-execs out, that percentage would have been even lower. Less than 2% are ethnic minority when the population had 14% ethnic minority. When I looked deeper into that data, actually only 1.3% were migrants, and almost all of those migrant directors in the FTSE were privately educated. So back in 2017, I realized that not only there's a lack of ethnic diversity in UK boardrooms, but that there is a social mobility issue that we urgently need to address. And that really was a big part of the impetus behind me launching Migrant Leaders back in 2017, registered with the Charity Commission in December 2017, and here we are today. So there was a recent update on the Parker Review, and there are some things to celebrate. The targets that the Parker Review set have largely been met, but there's more to it. So when we now look at the FTSE 100 boardrooms, including the non-execs, 16% are actually citizens of color. If we update the census data back then, which came from the 2011 census data, you would think that this is broadly in line with the percentage of ethnic minorities in the UK population. In fact, the target that said 1 by 21, there was a target where each FTSE 100 company was expected to have at least one ethnic minority director by 2021. And 89 of the FTSE 100 companies have achieved that target. And this includes non-exec directors, I should emphasize that. Likewise, with the 16%, it includes non-exec directors. So it is logical to say that there is a need for much further progress. We now need to set even more stretching targets and grow our ambition for ethnic diversity and social mobility. Because the next focus in the FTSE 100 has got to be the executive board positions. Today, in 2022, only 6 FTSE 100 CEOs are ethnic minority. And across the 1,000 or so board positions in the FTSE 100, only 12 positions are held, 12 executive director positions are held by ethnic minorities. So 12 out of hundreds, which would be executive director positions, only 12 are held by ethnic minority directors. And if we look at the social mobility story behind each of those directors, I bet the numbers would again prove to us that our work is not done and that we must continue our hard work. Migrant leaders, corporates, other charities, the whole country really needs to get together to address this structural issue that we have. So on the good news, further good news really, is that where we are today at Migrant Leaders is that we now have 1,000 mentors from 95 large companies, leading firms and organizations, 1,000 mentors and 950 mentees. 96% are ethnic minority, the young people, mostly first or second generation migrants, and 4% are actually white British disadvantaged, because we'd like to be inclusive, we'd like to share the benefits of our charity with all disadvantaged youth across the UK. We now work with the schools, colleges and universities across the UK who are located in 75 locations across the UK. Our mentees actually come from even more locations than that, because some of the mentees apply not just through the educational institutions we work with, but also through word of mouth. And believe it or not, we had a handful of applications because of TikTok. One of our young people decided to do a rap about migrant leaders on TikTok, and that generated a few applications. So we're now thinking about putting together a project called Take Migrant Leaders to TikTok. So watch this space. Really exciting things. So I want to also tell you about our latest corporate collaboration, because I really enjoyed this. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were at Westcon Comstar, and we took 8 of our wonderful university students who applied and got selected by us to spend a 3-day intensive internship with Westcon Comstar. This was our first hybrid internship, what I call hybrid internship, whereby 2 days were interactive online, meeting all the leaders, hearing about the business, learning about Westcon Comstar and the international business they have online with them. And then 1 day, full day, full of workshops and activities in Bracknell at their offices. And that was a wonderful, wonderful internship. And you can go to our impact report on our website, click on the video to give you a flavor of what that was about. More is coming. We are on the 28th of June going to be doing the same thing with the company Illumina. the science and genetics company. On the 4th of July, we are going to be with Salesforce. And more corporate partners are coming on board in July and further along as well. We are also continuing our work with our current corporate partners. So we're going to be delivering our multi-division Cantor internships across the summer, and our ABB internship with 6 to 8 of our university engineering students as well this July. So more and more work for us to do, and all of it highly energizing and life-changing for our deserving mentees. I am going to leave you with that because I really would like to pass over to our wonderful mentor, Farley Thomas, whose work will really help address some of the issues that are touched on by the Parker Review when the Parker Review talks about the development of a diverse talent pipeline in the corporates. So I shall pass to Farley and I will let him introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Elam, and I'm hoping everyone can hear me and see me fine. It's good to see some of you, but hopefully hear from more of you. I'll try my best to be brief. It's Friday afternoon, at least here in the UK, and I'm sure a lot of you are looking forward to the long weekend. Well, Elam, thank you for asking me to introduce myself, but also, of course, share a little bit of my experiences and what we're doing as an organization. I arrived from India in 1981. And I mean, I don't know how many of you experienced Britain in 1981, but that was a time when Italians were called names in the street, let alone Indians. And so, you know, a bit of my experience was difficult. I grew up in a council estate in Surrey, and well, I looked like I just arrived from India, and sounded like I just arrived from India. And you know, I guess, and also grew up in a single working parent household. And, you know, by the time I got to 18, I wasn't that incentivized to continue my education because money was an issue. And I left, I didn't finish my A-levels. And I was very excited to join the workforce, you know, and I got some opportunities. If you're hardworking, you get a lot of opportunities. And I think without thinking about it at the time, you know, I was very fortunate to have been mentored by, first of all, somebody who had been to university and could see that, you know, there was something there that I should really sacrifice earning money earlier on in my career and invest, save up, go to university, which I did. And I got into Manchester University, very exciting. I worked really hard and got a first in linguistics, and again, you know, applied to a lot of jobs. And I want to show you a slide in a minute about the why I shouldn't have been surprised at all about what happened to me. But you know, almost everybody rejected me just off the page. And you know, I was reflecting on how I got into the city. On a graduate trainee program at a very successful fund management firm with an office on 155 Bishopsgate, very prestigious. And my interviewer and sponsor was an outsider in the city himself, and he was a northerner, didn't sound particularly posh. And he was the only one, as I remember, that didn't sound particularly posh in this very posh sounding environment that I ended up in. But I do wonder if there was this kind of fortunate camaraderie between one outsider wanting to kind of back someone like me that also was very much visibly and audibly another outsider, and I suspect that's possibly the only reason I got into the city. And then, of course, you know, I was very fortunate and sort of just, you know, joined a relatively multicultural global organization, HSBC, where I found my groove, and I was fortunate enough to be given a lot of fantastic opportunities, including being coached on a few occasions, and also setting up mentorship schemes within HSBC, within the division of HSBC that I was on the board of. And I ended up on the board of the asset management division of HSBC, moved to the investment bank for several years, and ran a global P&L that at one point we added up was over $1 billion. I guess all of that experience got me thinking about the value and power of mentorship and coaching. And for various reasons I won't get into now, I always wanted to set up my own organization. And Elam, when you and I were talking, we were kind of commenting on quite a lot of interesting parallels between our respective trajectories. And I initially decided about 7 years ago to leave HSBC on a sabbatical, which then became permanent because I kind of loved the idea of doing my own thing. I set up initially a coaching practice. I retrained as an executive coach and did quite a bit of pro bono work, which I continue, but also started coaching a lot of senior executives, chief executives, and their teams. And 2 years ago, I kind of concluded that whilst that was hopefully excellent work and having a good impact, it really wasn't changing organizations fast enough. And I started to think about the inequality or the exclusive nature of coaching and mentorship, actually. And I love what you're doing, Alam, which is, democratizing mentorship and bringing support very early on so that people can get that first job, can get that first step up. And that sort of gave me the idea of launching a new business with some funding from a few CEOs who supported the idea, which today we call Manageable. And I'll share a little bit about Manageable, and hopefully there'll be some interesting questions from you, perhaps some ideas to change it, to evolve it. It's by no means perfect. I'm hoping you can all see my screen now. And I wanted to start with this idea that Alam gave me, that it isn't just about the first job, and that's already hard enough, as I'm sure you all know from your own experiences, but also in working with your mentees. And each of us is endowed with different levels of support from caregivers, from our education, from our personality, of course, but crucially, people that sponsor us, that guide us, that advise us, that challenge us. And of course, you are all doing that in your role as mentors, and that will have a fantastic impact on your mentees and their prospects, including the internships that you talked about, Alam. But some of these statistics may have improved. I worry that some of them may have actually got worse. But I stumbled across this interesting finding that a piece of research that the Guardian did a couple of years ago, that identical applications, by the way, this is part of the research. This was a research project. So identical cover letters, identical CVs, except information that indicated whether somebody was a white British applicant versus somebody from a minority ethnic background, and these were the response rates. If you seem to be a white British applicant, 24% of the time you got a positive response, but if you were not, you got a positive response only 15% of the time. And another way to think about it is that those who are perceived to be from minority ethnic backgrounds or lower socioeconomic backgrounds, if you like, have to apply 60% more in order to get the same response rate. So the hurdle is already there very early on for no good reason other than the perception of where you're from, and whether you are from and what kind of socioeconomic background you might be from. And Alam, you touched on this, particularly talking about movement at the non-executive board level. And it is indeed, as you characterize it, fantastic progress. But now, of course, you're shifting your focus to the executive boards, and there is a lot to do. And here's another perspective. And again, I think it's now widely known that around 14-15% of the working age population in the UK are from ethnic minority groups. When you look at those in employment, that again already drops to 10%. When you look at managers, particularly senior managers, it's 5-6%. And of course, Alam, as you've said, very, very few individuals from ethnic minority groups make up the most senior leaders within organizations. Another perspective, particularly looking at financial services, a study sponsored by the Corporation of London and the Bridge Group, there really seems to be, even if you get in, those from ethnic minority backgrounds, or in particular here, the focus was on lower socioeconomic backgrounds, get promoted much more slowly. And this, of course, is probably a combination of lack of mentorship, lack of sponsorship, but also, of course, views of managers and perhaps what they can get away with. And the takeaway here is those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, as judged by the education level of their parents. And I, for example, am the only one in my family that has been to university. So, and I'm sure that's shared. That has an impact. But it takes it. You are promoted more slowly, and maybe shifting our focus gradually to the focus of Manageable itself, which is how can managers form part of the solution to all of the evidence that I've been sharing with you, and something McKinsey very recently shared was one of the top reasons individuals leave their job. And the summary of McKinsey is a lack of personal and professional support. But the top reason most commonly given by those who are leaving without a job to go to, by the way, that was the focus of the study, it's uncaring leaders. And if we think about the second half of your name, Elam, what we really want to do is two things, I suppose, if I'm very biased in thinking about what Manageable is doing. On the one hand, we want to give earlier career minority groups access to a resource that is currently only for the privileged few, which is earlier career coaching support. And on the other hand, if we look at the other half of the equation, which is leaders, we want them to be more open, more inclusive and caring, and giving them a coaching orientation, we believe is a big part of the answer. And I often show this slide to organizations that are sponsoring our work, and we're very pleased to now be working with around 30 organizations. They see the problem through the lens of engagement. 1 in 10 individuals at work in Europe is really engaged at work. And I suspect that ratio is even worse if you focus only on ethnic minority groups, for all of the reasons that we've already discussed. And in best-in-class firms, it's 70+% who are really engaged. And our strong opinion is that the higher the engagement level, the more likely it is that leaders in those organizations have invested heavily in a coaching culture. And that coaching culture results in significant business benefits, materially higher profitability levels, as you can see on the right-hand side, a massive reduction in absenteeism, and lots of other things that happen, including far more equal opportunities. And some of those statistics that I've presented to you looking much better in these organizations with a coaching culture. And there is now very little argument about what managers need to be like in modern workplaces that are diverse, that are multi-generational, that are inclusive. And the headline, if you will, is manager as coach. And this is very much our starting point as Manageable. And Gallup's finding is particularly interesting because it isn't really what CEOs or leadership teams necessarily are doing day to day. Why do I say that? It's because 70% of engagement is determined solely by the manager of that team. So if you like, you can do amazing things at an organizational level as the CEO or the board or the leadership team. But if the managers, the frontline managers, team by team, are not shifting their behaviors, are not looking at individuals as individuals rather than making judgments about where they're from, what they look like, etc., then a lot of the good work is undone. And if managers do invest in their coaching skills, there's a lot in there for them individually. They get higher levels of engagement in their team. They, therefore, as a result of that, get higher levels of performance and well-being. They are able to attract and retain the best people. And of course, the best people are often, just as equally found in minority groups as they are in the wider population. And if you're keen on future-proofing yourself as a manager, then learning modern management skills, coaching skills, does exactly that. It future-proofs you. And then ultimately, if you have a social orientation or you're purpose-led, that style really helps everyone thrive. Now, I've given you a lot of context, and as a result of all of this, we became very obsessed about how can we get as many managers as possible to shift to a coaching style. And that basically means a bunch of skills which you know as well as I do, including, of course, listening, exploring, powerful goal setting. But there were 4 superpowers that we thought about that every manager should have. And those 4 superpowers are summarized by that phrase, a coaching style. One of them is curiosity, and then connectivity, candor, and then, of course, change enablement. And if every manager in every organization had these 4 superpowers, we would not have a lot of these biases and issues that we're still confronting and still partly with your work, Elam, tackling. The problem, though, is that a lot of organizations kind of buy into this. Yes, let's do something about coaching skills. It's quite difficult to actually pull off because it's a bit like language learning. You can't decide tomorrow to speak Farsi or French or whatever, and then suddenly you're doing it. It takes time. It takes effort. You need inspiration. You need practice, and you need an element of community-based learning. And so what we decided to do with Manageable is think about the coaching style of managers being a challenge, a bit like language learning. And therefore, what are the ingredients that we could include in a learning experience for managers that will, over a period of months, get them to be more fluent in the language of coaching? And that's that really was something we thought long and hard about. You know, it's easy to think about the transition, but hard to pull it off. And the why is what I've just said, that you need time, and it's very much requiring a language learning approach to the opportunity of acquiring coaching skills. And that's where we today have the Manageable experience. And what we are doing is anchoring the entire 6-month experience that managers go on. And they're sponsored by their organizations. They have to do, they spend at least half of their time in real coaching practice, either with other peers who are on the program. And by the way, this is not role playing, which has very limited skills acquisition value. It's really coaching your peers on issues that they are bringing to masterclasses that we run. And most importantly, and maybe very, very much relevant, and probably what sparked your idea to invite me, Elam, what we're also doing is creating real coaching challenges for every single manager, whereby we match them to someone earlier on in their career, after they've landed their first job, partly with all of your mentorship and your support. It doesn't end there. They continue to need opportunities to be coached, to be helped, to be guided. And so we match every single manager who's learning to coach to somebody who typically wouldn't get the opportunity to have somebody objective and external who acts as their coach over multiple sessions. And so that's where the real coaching component comes in, and it's half of the time. The other half of the time we're spending equipping managers to be more confident. So we run some assessments on their coaching skill set. We have coaching mentors that are guiding their learning journey. We run classes whereby they can learn with peers in small groups. And we also invite CEOs and global experts. And I think, Elam, you will be one of those guests on our program who offer continuous inspiration along the way. And this is our attempt to provide a part of the solution to the issues that we're all wrestling with. And if I stop here, this is really what we're ultimately trying to do. Rather than have coaching as an exclusive benefit or perk for the very senior and privileged few, and for the sectors that are high profit sectors, which can afford very expensive external coaches, what we are trying to do is look at the manager population across organizations and realize that all of the biases, all of the impediments facing individuals is driven by managers ultimately. within organizations. And if we can get them to shift to using those superpowers, those coaching skills, we will not only be helping everyone thrive within the team, within organizations, but also through our matching, give earlier career people in their first or second job an opportunity to be coached. And so I'm hoping that if, as you listen to me, you can think of some individuals that might benefit from being coached, they get a completely free opportunity to be on our platform. And we will match them to managers from large, small organizations, from startups, from big corporates. And the feedback by and large has been excellent. I'll stop there, Alam, because that's more than enough from me on a Friday afternoon. And I'd love to see if there are questions or challenges or ways in which perhaps we can improve what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Farley. I think what you have presented just now is incredibly powerful, because if managers could really lead like this, be leaders and coaches, as is suggested, it will change the DNA of organizations. And the managers will then, as coaches, be able to deliver on the DNA of the organization that the leadership in the boards set. So I think managers are so important to organizations, and what you've said is incredibly powerful. So thank you so much for that. So we would, as Farley said, we would really welcome questions, answers, comments, feedback, suggestions. If anyone wanted to speak up with their cameras and unmute themselves, they're very welcome to. Bhavin, please go ahead.
Hi, Alan. Farley, thank you so much for that. Maybe I can share my experience and maybe one of the key challenges. So I work for quite a large organization where they brought a leadership program into the organization, really to create the same language for leaders to use as they're coaching and all that. But leadership coaching was always the second part of your job. It wasn't your day job. You were always judged and assessed on your day job, and leadership was something you did on the side. Do you see that as a challenge, that actually people are not assessed as leaders, and especially when you look at the middle layer of management, right? Not exco members or something like that, that because they're not recognized, they're not assessed on that, you can't really get good at that. You can't really put all your efforts into becoming a great leader.
Thank you, Bhavin. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I do think, you know, the management, and it's hard to actually know why, but, you know, in most fields, I mean, you wouldn't kind of just say to somebody, you know, why don't you be a doctor now? You know, you've done enough nursing. Let's now get you to be a doctor. Try that out for a while. And if people get better and there aren't any kind of, if the mortality rate doesn't increase, perhaps you're going to be actually really quite good as a doctor. I mean, it just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it, Bhavin? And yet, I think, I mean, me included, you know, I became a global MD at HSBC at a shockingly early age and caused mayhem for a while. And I do wonder what it is about leadership and management that either requires no training, no assessment for fit, and very little ongoing benchmarking. Of course, I'm kind of I'm creating a caricature, but I think many organizations are really shining a light on this, Bhavin. And you know, you will be familiar with, you know, Google's research on you know what it is about management and managers that makes a difference, and their conviction around the impact on performance and well-being being driven by managers that actually accidentally, I suppose, originally had a coaching orientation. You know, they were really focusing on those 4 superpowers that I talked about, you know, curiosity, connectivity, candor and change, enablement. And I think my hope, and there is a lot of evidence, Bhavin, that there seems to be a lot more intentionality now in what is it that you need to invest in to be great as a manager, and what sorts of qualities are we going to insist that you exhibit in order for you to progress as a leader in an organization. I think, and you have to tell me, Bhavin, but it still seems slightly hit and miss, and maybe a little bit on paper rather than in practice. But at least the language is shifting. And the more we have this evidence base that teams led by people with a coaching style really have far higher engagement levels and therefore deliver far better performance whilst also feeling good. And the more we have this evidence, and Cisco has created that evidence, Google has created that evidence, more and more organizations are seeing it, and linking that to diversity and inclusion, and the more we will, I think, develop a playbook that managers. I don't think it's about them being good at things before getting the job. I actually believe that what you need to do is have the opportunity to lead, and then a lot of resources to support you in your efforts to lead well.
Absolutely. And I think, Bim, you have your hand up as well. Would you like to make your next comment?
Oh, hi. Thank you very much for your presentation, Farley. I quite enjoyed. I think what I want to say, whether it's a comment or a question, I think is both, actually. Personally, I believe that the word leader and manager is often quite used interchangeably, but I believe they're two separate, they do two separate things. So it's oftentimes you find that there are managers, but it's very hard to find someone who's a manager and at the same time a leader, because I think a leader go further. So a manager, if we're talking about it in a corporate context, I mean, I've worked with managers who would manage just according to, you know, what the job spec says, and that's the end thing. Whereas leaders would go further. They're a lot more interested in the people that they're leading, they influence, they're interested in your growth, as opposed to, you know, I mean, as I said, my personal experiences, I've worked with a manager who he would do exactly what he says on the thing. Like, this is where I'm supposed to manage, what I'm supposed to do for you 9 to 5 as a manager, and that's it. He doesn't care whether, you know, I want to grow or whether I want to further my or anything like that. He doesn't care. And he would say, well, this is my job and I've done it. Whereas I've worked with another manager who is very much interested, and not just me, in the team. So I think the question I wanted to ask is, so is it possible for your program to be able to identify so that people can then be coached according to exactly what they want? Because there are some people who are not interested in actually being a leader. They just want to be the manager and that's it. Whereas there are people who's got the ability to be a leader and they want to be. So, I mean, that's my opinion. I just think those two things are quite two different things, but often used interchangeably.
I've got to interject at this point before, Farley, you take this one on board, because I must admit, I personally believe that leadership and management are absolutely not mutually exclusive. I don't think managers should get to choose whether they want to be also a leader or not. I think one of the best ways of developing leadership is through the everyday management activities, when it comes to hiring, resourcing, dealing with challenging targets, and dealing with disappointments that you and your team sometimes get, dealing with difficult customer feedback, difficult, all sorts of situations every day as we are managing people, give us the opportunity to demonstrate and coach our team on how to be a leader. I don't think without those day-to-day business scenarios, we can demonstrate leadership.
Yes, it's. I mean, I'm resisting just agreeing 100%, Alam, but trying maybe offer something additive. And I think, Bim, you also, you know, raise it. You know, it is a big topic, and I think it all does get terribly confused, because I think there are these poles. So, you know, we talk about managers and management. And it's very hard to know whether there is a focus on people or processes, because you have managers of both. And often management is sort of a little bit dehumanized, you know. And I certainly am very interested in the excellent management of performance outcomes through people who are valued and who are recognized for excellent work and are cared about. And I think so. So if we think about management in that sense, it perhaps is quite constructive. And then in exactly the same way, I think leadership also gets quite confused. Often people use it as a shortcut to talking about people in the C-suite, leadership. But then on the other hand, I believe strongly that everybody from one years old, perhaps even younger, to 101 years old, have opportunities to exercise leadership in all sorts of interactions, social interactions continuously. And, you can at times be a follower, which is, by the way, a fantastic thing to be doing. And also in another moment, you are the leader. You are the one influencing. You have some kind of social power, which you need to exercise wisely, sensitively, in an inclusive way. So these things are terribly confused. But Bim, just on your very specific question, what we are trying to do is to say to managers that they have to lead well, because they're responsible for leadership in their team, in their organization, and so we give them opportunities to discover what elements of their coaching skill set do they over-index, do they overuse, and which elements do they under-index and underuse. And we don't tell everybody to work on the same skills. We give them opportunities to think about what do they really need to focus on, and which of their peers are really strong at those things, so that they can kind of help and support each other. So we're really trying to give individual managers a sense of being in control of what they need to sharpen, what they need to practice more, what they need to evidence more in order to see that it will help them get the best out of their teams. I'll stop there, Alam, because at least as far as I can see on my screen, Faisal has dutifully put his hand up. But there are also a few questions that I'll come back to later on in the chat, which are excellent, by the way.
Well, first of all, Elham, Farley, thank you for your insights. I was just going to add something to what Elham and Farley you said. So it's not really a question, but you may want to touch upon it. So this is the first time in history that we've got 5 generations in the workplace at the same time, which really makes it interesting. So you've now got the younger generation, including migrants, challenging older generations for similar positions, and people staying in the workplace a lot longer than they did before. This creates its own challenges that I've started to see, because you've now got people in leadership or management positions that actually don't want to be there. And they're more than happy to be a single contributor, and they're having to go down that route because of they think that that's the only way that they'll get their promotion, the pay rises and things like that. And actually this is impacting migrant workers a lot more, because we've got a lot more migrant workers that are becoming educated and coming through the system and coming through, the education system into the workplace. And so I'm challenging this internally into my organization, that we have to create a 2-tier system. And this is where people are going to disagree with me frantically, I know. But when I say that is, you have to have a single contributor or a manager, but on different paths, but in similar levels. Because not everyone wants to be a manager. Not everyone wants to be a leader. People can lead within a project environment, and they're more than happy to do that. People can lead in a support environment, they're more than happy to do that. But the moment that you give them a team, the moment that you give them an individuals, it takes on a different boundary, it takes on a different responsibility. And I'm seeing a real sort of drop in that places. And that's where I think, in these communities, as we all, aspire to do different things in our own careers, and as we work up the ladder, we've got to raise our voices, because we've got to make sure that the youngsters coming behind us have the varied opportunities that some of us may have had, but also get the opportunities at the right time rather than waiting for it to happen.
That's a really good point, Faisal. And I think looking at companies such as EY, Accenture, and others, they have developed 2 routes for some technical people who don't want to leave their technical work and instead lead large projects and large number of people, they don't want to move away from their technical work. So those two routes now exist in a number of organizations, such as Accenture and EY. But I think I want to go back to one of our migrant leaders' patrons' words, René Carayol, who always says that you can be a leader at every level in the organization. Every day through your actions, you can show leadership. So the leadership impact of each individual will always be there, and they would benefit from knowing how to develop others and support others.
And if I may, Alam, just quickly, Faisal, I think you're spot on about this really challenging. I mean, you know, a part of what I shared with you at the beginning of my presentation, I didn't characterize it at the time as a relatively hostile environment. You know, work, sadly, is quite a hostile environment for human beings because we are told to work in teams. We're told to collaborate. We are sometimes told that we need to build a team. We are then called into meetings to be told how we are performing, and there is a lot of sort of judgment, and it's quite a lot like the things we thought we got away from, which is, you know, how we're treated very early in life, where we're constantly told, don't do that, don't touch that. And so I think one of the reasons we've got quite obsessed with this coaching style is that it really is about asking and not telling. And the more we can kind of make that the habit, the more we will get, you know, the best out of individuals. And I completely, you know, agree that one of the big challenges facing today's managers or leaders, you know, is the significant increase in diversity in many respects. And one of them you've touched on, Faisal, which is, gosh, isn't it going to be super challenging for leaders of teams to avoid the confusion, to have on the one hand somebody who's in their late teens, early 20s, and on the other hand, you know, the gray economy is already massive financially, but is also going to be more and more prominent at work, and everybody can't be in charge, right? So you're going to have more and more teams, and also the sense of making it a worthy expression of your talent to be an individual contributor. You know, what a wonderful thing that would be if people were proud that that is what they did because it played to their strengths. And sadly, we're not quite there, are we, Faisal? That it really does seem to be about empire building and span of control and all these other nonsensical things, which unfortunately do seem to help to get you ahead of the curve. But anyway, I don't know who we turn to next, Alam. I mustn't take over.
That's all right. That's all right. So we've got Sasha next, who's kindly put her hands up.
Hi there. Thanks again to both of you so much. It's been really interesting. I actually just wanted to know, from a practical point of view, Farley, how would either an individual or an organisation get involved with Manageable and actually, you know, make use of the, you know, what you're doing? I mean, I think I would find it really interesting and useful and beneficial to be able to participate. So I just wonder if it's something that needs to be done at a sort of organisational level, that my company would have to engage with you, or is it something that you do with individuals?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Sasha. And I also read your comment in the chat. Well, I mean, at this stage, we are working with companies, with organizations, and typically the CEO or other decision makers, and often it is heads of HR or L&D, and they partner with us and identify individuals who either want to, like you, Sasha, by the sounds of things, want to future-proof themselves, want to keep learning. And by the way, you're by no means in the majority. And then they sponsor those individuals, and we actually urge them not to pick people that are not really that engaged in self-development. And so that's the route for managers. And I mean, again, you know, we haven't quite thought through a direct route, and you know, perhaps, you know, what sort of changes we need to make to pricing. We're trying to make it as affordable and scalable as possible for organizations, so that it isn't something that is just for the privileged few managers. And then on the other side of it, Sasha, and perhaps Alam, you could help with this. We have a digital application process for anyone at any stage in their career, really, who feels as if they would benefit from from a more experienced manager at a completely different organization, and we match those who apply and those who have a coaching goal. That's the one condition. So we have two conditions. You must actually want help with something specific, and you must be willing to be engaged and provide a little bit of candid feedback to your manager who is coaching you. And so everybody gets to practice some important skills, like, can I be really candid and say that was awesome? or can I be really candid and say that really didn't help as much as I thought it would? And this is all part of the learning process. So I'll be very happy to through Alam and make available the link to apply to be a coachee, Sasha. And then if it is of interest to you, often I think the best way to start with organizations is someone like you saying to whoever is the budget holder in your organization, look, I've found something really quite interesting and I'd like you to evaluate it. And we have quite a lot of heads of L&D that have kicked the tires extensively, Sasha, so you can be quite confident that it works.
Fantastic. No, I'll do that. I'll basically escalate it to the right teams and see whether it's something we could gain traction with at an organizational level. Thank you.
Thank you. Elam, there was something in the chat about sponsorship, and I'm mindful of time as well, Elam. So I just wanted to say very quickly that that point is absolutely spot on, and clearly there's a lot of evidence that certain groups, and by the way, there's one very large group, women, that have struggled or do struggle to prioritize identifying sponsors within the organization, and I think part of our work in connecting individuals across industries, across sectors, and also matching individuals where there is an experience gap. It isn't just about having quality coaching conversations. We're also by default creating a bit more of a focus on sponsorship. Somebody more experienced, more senior is taking an interest and probably going to prod you, who are the equivalents within your organization? What could you do to cultivate that sponsorship? So I couldn't agree more with the importance of sponsorship. And I think this is where pure traditional executive coaching falls down, I believe, because there isn't that sponsorship element. It is a great coaching resource, but it isn't quite the same thing as somebody more senior taking an interest in you. I just wanted to add that on sponsorship, Elam.
Absolutely, and I think Farley, we've experienced overlaps between mentoring, coaching, and sponsorship at Migrant Leaders, because myself included as one of the mentors, and many of our mentors, as trust and a relationship is built with their mentee, they feel able to introduce and vouch for that mentee to their contacts. And when opportunities come up, they introduce them, they give them opportunities, they vouch for them, they push them, challenge them. All of those good sponsorship activities happen simultaneously with mentoring and coaching as the trust and relationship is built. So I think the best form of a sponsorship is when it develops naturally. At certain management consultancies, sometimes they say, yes, you must have a sponsor and we will allocate you a sponsor from the senior leadership team. In my view, that doesn't work so well. Sponsorship can only happen naturally if a relationship and trust is built through either a direct line manager or external coaching or a mentor, preferably in a similar industry.
You're so right, Elam. And I've left HSBC a while ago now, and I'll share this little story. It'll only take a few seconds, but I was one of those individuals, Elam, fortunate, and I was put into the group talent pool. And one of the things you get is an opportunity to have meetings with the group chairman. And as a sponsor of you, and I went off to, at the time it was Stephen Green, the chairman of HSBC, and I remember both of us just probably being petrified of this conversation. What are we going to talk about? No one seemed to really want to do this. So you're completely right, Alam. It's not about gifting, with good intentions, gifting sponsors to individuals. I think it's about forging a contract of sorts, a social contract based on mutual benefit. If there's no benefit to the sponsor, that doesn't sound like the right kind of deal. And there's got to be some proactive keenness on the part of the mentee or the coachee for the magic to work. Couldn't agree more.
Excellent. So everyone, we've got 2 or 3 minutes left, and I wonder if anyone would like to make any final points or ask any final questions.
Hi, Farley. Do you mind if I ask a quick one?
Hi, Manish. Good to see you. Yes, please.
You too. And Farley, that was absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed your talk. Thanks a lot, and really interesting work you're doing. Thank you for your comments on sponsorship, and completely agree with what you said. What I wanted to ask you about is there's lots of evidence that's built that women and ethnic minorities who undertake diversity conscious activity, be that mentoring, coaching, sponsoring, they pay a performance perception penalty, right? Which white men who do the same thing don't face, right? Given that evidence, it becomes really difficult for me to persuade or convince my senior ethnic minority or female colleagues to do that kind of thing. Any thoughts or advice from you on how to go about that?
Gosh, you put me on the spot, Manish. Perhaps you were asking Alam. It's a tough question.
It's funny you say that. I've read that piece of research you referred to, Manish, that it surprised me, that research, that ethnic minority leaders, female leaders who do this sort of activity sometimes get penalized for it, when that penalty doesn't apply to white male leaders. That surprised me, but when I thought about it, I looked at the evidence, and my experience is true. I think the answer is making what Farley is talking about part of the DNA of an organization, whereby it is absolutely expected that anyone who has impact on their colleagues, on their direct reports, on their clients, customers, that they adopt this coaching style, and that the repercussions and rewards of that style and impact are delivered every day, because there has to be a flip side of this. And those who deliver on their numbers but destroy people, there have to be repercussions. If there aren't, then this doesn't become part of the DNA of the organization. Conversely, those who are great leaders who develop the people around them should be rewarded for that. And if the board build that into the reward system of the organization and exercise those behaviors every day and reward those behaviors every day and promote based on that visibly, then people start believing it, and it becomes part of the DNA of the organization.
Yeah, and Manish, perhaps if I could add a couple of thoughts. I think definitely it's intriguing, this finding, but also I kind of, now that I've thought about it, I kind of think, yes, unfortunately, it's sort of intuitive in the end, and I think one part of it is evidence, this phrase evidence-based practice. So if we measured how much time was being devoted to mentoring, sponsorship, coaching, conversations, you would see that it was probably underweight those individuals that perhaps perceive that they would be penalized for doing it. But immediately you start a virtuous circle, because now people can be curious. Hey, that's funny. How come you aren't spending as much time on this activity as someone else? Look at the data. you're spending 30% less time sponsoring, coaching, and nurturing the next generation of leaders or whatever. And so you start to create a kind of an evidence and data-driven focus on who is and who isn't and why. Then I wonder, there's also this idea that, how do we I wonder, Manish, if another part of it is how individuals from minority groups, and indeed, women are portraying this activity. Are they downplaying its importance? Are they not so proud about it? Because, and I wonder, as managers of teams, including you, Manish, is there some work to be done to coach those individuals who ought to be spending more time on these activities, not just to spend more time on it, but also to talk about that activity and appear as if this is really part of the job. This is really powerful stuff. And so maybe there's a few things there that will shift what you see day to day. But I think rather than there being a magic, a silver bullet, it's probably a few of these things. It's sort of trial and error. But I do strongly believe that measuring and showing the evidence, a bit like Elam did at the beginning, right? Very powerful, isn't it? We've got a 5-year compare and contrast, and it really focuses our minds that there is still a lot to do. Yeah, great question, Manish.
So Farley, you need to develop some analytics for your customers at your company then.
Yes, we're working on that, actually.
Yeah,
we're working on that.
This is wonderful. Everyone, it's just after 5 p.m. I will start winding things up so that everyone can start their long weekend. Farley, I can't begin to thank you enough. I've really enjoyed your presentation, and welcome to Migrant Leaders, everyone. Thank you.